Throughout the Church's history, significant spiritual movements have emerged to respond to the challenges of the day. At this time, we are witnessing the emergence of new ecclesial movements. Although many are founded by lay people, they often embrace all forms of vocation within the Church. The movements are marked by a strong focus on prayer, scripture, liturgy, evangelization, and loyalty to the Holy Father. Many movements have expanded across the globe, providing support especially for smaller Catholic communities in lands where Christians are a minority. These movements are a sure sign of the continuing presence of the Holy Spirit, working in new and unexpected ways. Hello and welcome to Catholic Focus. I'm Sheridan Sanders. As the phenomenon of ecclesial movements grows within the Church today, we'll learn more about one of these communities, the Focolare movement. Focolare was founded in 1943 by Chiara, a young laywoman when she was just 23 years old. The community was forged at a time when Chiara's city of Trent was being ravaged during the Second World War. In radical opposition to the times, however, Chiara and her friends decided to give themselves completely over to God and to love of neighbor. Together they sought to build a more united world, a world filled with fraternal love and reconciliation. Were they just idealists? Well, it seems not, because today Focolare is an international community of men and women present in more than 180 nations throughout the globe. With millions of followers and already a blessed among their ranks, here today to share with us more about Focolare is Jeroen van der Biezen, a longtime Focolare member who has lived for more than 17 years as a consecrated person. And I should add that Jeroen is also the manager of our master control, where he literally keeps the Sultan Light signal broadcasting to all of our viewers. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
What inspired you to join the Focolare movement?
Yeah, well, to answer this question, I have to say a little bit something of my story. Like the Focolare movement has been present in my family since I was about 3-4 years old. My father, he picked up a leaflet in the church. He was just baptized, and so he was also searching how to
live out his Christian life.
Yeah, exactly. So he picked up a leaflet where there was a phrase of the gospel with underneath a comment written by Chiara, and that's back in Holland. So, and that comment explained how you can put that phrase of the gospel into practice for a period of 2 weeks, and then there would be a new leaflet with a new phrase and a new. So he was struck by this way of living, so he kind of, we were children, we were 5 siblings, so we were just tagging along with our parents, and we would play with other kids when there were like Focolare meetings. And but it was like when I grew a little older that things were starting to acquire like a new meaning for me. And I was setting myself up to go to study engineering, and I was kind of making a project of my life, and thinking, I have only one life to live. And I wanted to, I saw that in the Focolare movement there is like a consecrated branch, so people who really dedicate themselves like 24/7 to live out this charism. And I saw that's a beautiful way of living, right? But on the other hand, I also saw like a family. It's like that would be my natural attraction, to go and build a beautiful family just like the one that I come from. So I had like all these options open. And at the same time, I started trying to also live out this lifestyle based on the gospel, which I saw that Chiara was someone who could really explain very well how you can do that, because I never found those answers by going to Mass, because in the little village where I come from, like the homily and the readings, they were not really like explained a whole lot. So I had always more questions than answers. Whereas in the experience of Chiara, I got a lot of very simple answers to my questions. And so I think there are all these elements together, like I felt like I want to live a life that is truly meaningful. And at the same time, and that was really deep I wanted to be free. Like I would like to be a free person, you know? And I think all the youth have that. And so then I had the chance to go to a convention in Italy of the Focolare movement, where there was a gathering of a lot of young people who were sort of keeping various doors open for choices of life, you know. And there was one of these Focolarini, so a consecrated person. His name was Corim, and I had met him some years earlier, and I could speak with him in English because I didn't speak any Italian. So I met him again, and in the meantime, he had gotten sick, and he had a tumor in his throat, which he was very skinny, was in a wheelchair, and you could tell that, and actually he died only 3 weeks afterwards. And he came to greet us, and I saw him again, and obviously I could see the change from, you know, how sick he had fallen, but he had, like, in his eyes and in his face, like a joy and a freedom and a happiness. And I thought, wow, you know, he found the key, he nailed it, you know. And he said, if you are afraid to say yes to this life and to say yes to give yourself to God, kick those fears away, because fears do not come from God, they come from man. And in that moment, I felt within as if God was saying me, you know, if you want, this life can be for you too. And my whole list of reasons not to take a step like that, I was also very scared. You know, I felt this invitation, which came, it was like a loving voice, you know. So I said yes, and all these reasons not to do it, they really fell away, and it became really a logical consequence of this yes. And I think from there on, like, a whole adventure started. Like, my life was, like, I could not have imagined a life like this, you know. I would have imagined myself having a family, but it took a whole different way, which is beautiful. And I really like this attraction also to live a life that is meaningful. I discover every day, also today, that it's like a process. And every time I discover something new, that I see, yes, it's still attractive to live this life. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what inspired me.
Now, you've had the opportunity to meet Chiara Lubick in person. What was your impression?
Yeah, it's true. Like in 1999, towards the end of 1999, I started working for a video production company in Italy, a video production company that is part of the Focolare movement, and its main task was to document Chiara Lubick on her travels, her meetings. Some meetings were very big, other meetings were like private meetings. So I had a lot of moments to see her, also a bit, you know, in daily life, if you want, like between one meeting and another. And I remember the first time, my first travel, that was when in May 2000, we went to Africa in Cameroon. And I was the camera assistant, so I was, you know, rather insignificant in the whole setting there. And I was standing in the corner not to disturb anybody. And Chiara arrived with another group of people, and she saw me standing there. And she left everybody where they were, and she came to me. And she just started talking, asking, so how are you doing? And says, oh, here's the Hollandaise, as she said, the Dutchman, you know. And she asked me about if I was happy living in Italy, if I liked the weather, if I liked the food. And I think that's like a first, something that struck me in her is that she was capable of a personal love. And I really had the impression that in that particular moment, I was the most important person for her. Like as if there was nobody else. And I also saw in her that freedom, like not to be conditioned by anything, but really guided by what is love in each present moment. And like Chiara Lubick, like I learned later, like is somebody to whom God entrusted the charism, right? So she was also very much an instrument in the hands of God. So I think that in her as a person, she was also able to sort of disappear and to really communicate the personal love that God has for each one of us.
And she challenged you as well. You know of another encounter where she literally called you out.
Well, yeah, that happened in Germany, in Berlin. We were there again to film, and she just had given a beautiful talk about the various qualities of Christian love, you know. And that I thought was a beautiful talk. So afterwards I was packing up the cameras, and there was a corridor, and she just happened to walk by, going, I think, towards the car. And I stopped her. I said, yeah, that was a beautiful talk you just had given, right? And she stopped and she looked at me like with this look that really sort of penetrates your soul. And she says, put it into practice and you'll see what happened. And I remember it very lively, even today, because it's like I can imagine, like Chiara is somebody who actually puts that into practice, and a whole movement came about, right? And I thought, if there's anything that God would want to tell me, it would be put this into practice and you'll see what I can do. You know, you see what I'm capable of. And I think that's another quality of Chiara, is that the relationships that she built were relationships built in the truth. So not compromising, and I think that comes also with a pure love, comes also the freedom to be able to love somebody in the truth. So I think these are just two elements of Chiara Lubick. Like, we could talk more about her, but there's maybe no time.
There's this huge community. It's spread out all over the globe. How is Focolare structured, and what is its relationship with the Vatican?
So that's a good question. Actually, I brought with me a little booklet, which are our general statutes. And in here is described, it's like the photograph of what is the Focolare movement. Now, in the first article, it says that the Focolare movement is a private, universal association of faithful of pontifical right. So,
but what does that actually mean, though?
Yeah. Well, it means like everything has been approved by the Vatican, right, in a nutshell. And actually, I believe it was 1964 that Chiara Lubick was asked to write down the first rules. And they were approved by the Vatican, and then over time, like, new decrees were issued, and I believe the last amendment was in 2007. So that's like our status with the Vatican.
And then in terms of the statutes or rules, if there was one rule that would represent everything that you are about, what would that be?
What I find particularly beautiful, like, this is written by Chiara Lubick and by the people who helped her, like, close by, but she actually insisted to write at the very beginning a premise, and it says the premise to every other rule. And maybe I can just read it. It's very short, but it sets the tone also of like the underlying, like, the spirituality of the Focolare movement, right? And it goes like this: mutual and constant love, which makes unity possible and brings the presence of Jesus amongst all, is for those who are part of the work of Mary the basis of their life, under every aspect. It is the norm of norms and the promise to every other rule. Chiara Lubick.
So it's very beautiful.
Yeah, so this is like the premise, which comes, like, that animates every other rule that we try to live.
So it's called the work of Mary. What does that mean?
Yes. Well, yeah, like it says here, it's work of Mary. And that's our official name. Like, the work of Mary is also how we are registered at the Vatican. If you go on the Vatican website, for example, you can find all these private associations. And that's because, what Mary did, she gave physically Jesus to the world. And the work of Mary, we also want to give Jesus in a spiritual way to the world. And it already says it in this premise that, where two or more are united in Jesus' name, he promised to be present. So it's this presence of Jesus that, just like another Mary, we would like to bring to the world. So that's one reason why the official name is Work of Mary.
And from your general statutes, I saw that the president is always a woman. Why is that?
Yes, so that's another reason why it's called Work of Mary, because Chiara Lubick, she once asked John Paul II, and I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe it was in the setting of after a lunch she had with him, And she asked, Your Holiness, would you be happy if the president of the Focolare movement would always be a woman? And he said in Italian, magari, which is not so easy to translate, but it means so much as, that's what I would wish. So that's why it's written in our statutes that the president will always be a woman, a lay woman, and our co-president will always be a man.
And that, of course, has very interesting consequences for the community, because if you have a lay woman, it means that it, in a sense, protects the lay identity of the movement.
Yeah, that's right.
In terms of living your everyday life, how do you see yourselves as dialogue partners? I know that's something that's very important to Focolare members.
Well, yeah, like I said, we have these two goals of the Focolare movement. One is this general goal, and then there are the specific goal. And the specific goal is to strive to this unity, that all may be one, like the unity that Jesus prayed for at the end of his life, when he prayed the Father, that they all may be one. And we try to achieve this unity through a series of dialogues. So we have, for example, the dialogue within the Catholic Church and with other associations. So we have like activities that we do together with other ecclesial movements, for example. We have a dialogue between the various Christian churches, the ecumenical dialogue. For example, maybe a nice example here could be because recently Pope Francis, he went to the Holy Land, and he had this famous meeting with the Patriarch Bartolomeo. And actually also in the history of the Focolare movement, when there was the famous embrace between Paul VI and the Patriarch of the time, Athenagoras. Also Chiara had a chance to meet many times with Athenagoras and to build like a personal relationship with him.
So she was really a mediator between the two churches.
Yes, yeah. Well, you could see it like that, like an instrument of unity. And she met with the Patriarch about 23 times, so they built a beautiful relationship. And she would also report back to Paul VI. So. And I think this is like a beautiful example of dialogue, done personally by Chiara, and that's also something we try to imitate. And then we have like a dialogue also with people from different religions. And then a fourth dialogue is the dialogue with those people who do not maybe profess a certain faith, so who do not belong to any religion at all. Yeah.
And why do you think that Focolare its dialogue work is so fruitful?
Well, I think like I said earlier, like our life is like based on the gospel, right? And this is like an effort that we try to put into practice in every moment of our day. So from the moment I get up, I go maybe at work, at school, studies, in the family, and like in the Gospels also we find for example, St. Paul, he talks about to make yourself everything with everybody, so to make yourself one, and to really, when I want to love somebody, I sort of have to like make myself empty so that I can welcome somebody else. And if that love becomes reciprocal, it's our experience that, that there is this presence of Jesus amongst us, which also illuminates like the seeds of the word that are present in, for example, the other religions. So it's like a dialogue that gets built up on a grassroots level through a dialogue of like an attitude of love, where also the person doesn't feel maybe threatened or pressured, or but actually discovers like also the beauty in its own religion. And we can build a dialogue that is a dialogue based on what we have in common and not on what divides. And I think this is something we see happening on like all different levels. Also just like we recently had here in Toronto an event on March 20th, where there were people present from different churches. So it was an ecumenical event, and at the same time people from different religions. And when I was looking at those who were present, they were all there because of like personal relationships built over time, over many years, also built maybe through very concrete acts of charity, you know, just so that there is like a common ground of love on which you can build a dialogue.
I can see some parallels between Chiara Lubik and the source of inspiration for IDI, who is Fethullah Gülen, a prominent speaker, a Muslim thinker from Turkey, who's done a lot of work in the field of interfaith and intercultural dialogue. And from what I know about Chiara, she was one of the initiators or one of the main figures, was the driving force behind opening up towards people of other faiths and promoting conversation and mutual understanding between people of different faiths.
As I was traveling through Turkey with the IDI, I kept saying this is a base ecclesial community. That coming from a Catholic background, I recognized the Hizmet movement because of my connection and my knowledge of movements like the Focolare, like Communion and Liberation, like the various base ecclesial communities. So at some point I said, you must know the Focolarini if you don't already. And the funny thing was that I think I introduced them in Toronto, and then I discovered that in Rome, they'd been in dialogue for years. And so the folks in Rome said, of course we know them.
It symbolizes in many ways the nature of dialogue. I mean, we have to establish the humanity of who we are in terms of coming together and establishing trust. And that can only happen through interpersonal engagement and relationships, and Chiara's an expert at that. She just does it so naturally. And that's certainly a contributing reason to her great success and the expansion and the growth of the Focolare movement itself.
I think that's one of the most important things to remember about dialogue is it's ongoing. We can't meet once, twice, 3 times and then feel that it's all done. The conversation is for always and forever. The nature, what we might discuss specifically will change, of course, but it's about relationship building. It's also about drawing others in, and it's also about dialogue across and through generations.
Those were some remarks from a recent interfaith gathering hosted by the Focolare community in Toronto, Canada. Join us for the continuation of our special feature on Focolare, The Work of Mary, where we'll pick up our conversation with Jeroen to learn about the young teenager Chiara Luce Bedano, the movement's first blessed. All this in part 2 of Focolare, The Work of Mary.